Some structures were never meant to be found again. They were sealed beneath the earth, carved into mountains, and hidden in places where no one was expected to return. Entire cities disappeared. Tombs remained untouched. Fortresses stood in silence as the civilizations around them vanished. But stone remembers. Across deserts, cliffs, and forgotten landscapes, these places still exist exactly where they were built, waiting, preserved, undisturbed for thousands of years. In this video, we explore ancient ruins, buried chambers, lost cities, and structures that have survived longer than the people who created them. What they left behind is still here, and it has never stopped waiting. The bone that someone carefully notched 20,000 years ago. In a museum display case, protected behind glass and carefully preserved under controlled conditions, there rests a small fragment of bone that does not immediately appear remarkable in size or shape. It is narrow, slightly curved, and darkened by time. Its surface shows signs of age and exposure, and at first glance it could easily be mistaken for an ordinary animal bone. But when examined closely, a series of deliberate markings becomes visible. These markings are not random scratches, they are evenly spaced notches, cut into the bone by human hands approximately 20,000 years ago. This object is now known as the Lobombo bone. It represents one of the earliest known examples of humans creating permanent marks to record information. The bone was discovered in the Lobombo Mountains, a region that lies between present-day South Africa and Eswatini. This area contains caves and rock shelters that were used by early human populations during the late Stone Age. These shelters provided protection from environmental conditions and served as places where people lived, worked, and preserved tools and materials. The bone itself was found among other archaeological remains, including stone tools and evidence of human occupation. Its preservation was made possible by the stable conditions inside the cave environment, where temperature and humidity changes were limited. This allowed organic material, which would normally decay over time, to survive for thousands of years. What makes the Lobombo bone significant is not its material, but the markings carved into its surface. These notches were created deliberately. They were placed with intention. They reflect controlled human action. When researchers examined the bone closely, they observed that the notches were evenly spaced and showed consistent depth and shape. This consistency indicates that they were not the result of accidental damage or natural processes. Instead, they were made using tools capable of cutting into the surface of the bone. Each notch required effort. Each notch required precision. Each notch required intention. The presence of these markings suggests that the bone was used as a form of recording device. Early humans may have used it to keep track of quantities, time, or events. The notches represent a physical method of preserving information outside the human mind. This reflects cognitive ability. It reflects planning. It reflects abstract thinking. The creation of permanent markings allowed information to exist independently of memory. Instead of relying solely on spoken communication or mental recall, early humans could record something physically and refer to it later. The bone became a medium. The markings became information. The object became a record. This represents a significant development in human behavior. It demonstrates the ability to create symbols that carry meaning beyond their immediate physical form. This ability would later become the foundation for written language, mathematics, and organized systems of record keeping. The Lobombo bone provides evidence of this early stage. It shows the beginning of recorded thought. It preserves the earliest form of counting or tracking. The bone itself was originally part of a baboon's fibula. Early humans selected it, shaped it, and marked it using tools made from stone. These tools were capable of producing sharp edges that could cut into bone surfaces. The carving process required control. It required careful movement. It required repeated effort. The survival of the bone allows modern researchers to study the physical evidence of early human cognition. The markings remain clearly visible, preserving the exact pattern created thousands of years ago. The bone has not changed, the markings remain intact, the information remains visible. Its preservation allows direct observation of human activity from a time long before written records existed. It provides physical proof that early humans were capable of abstract thought and intentional recording. The Labambo bone is not large, it is not visually complex, but its importance lies in what it represents. It represents the moment when humans began to externalize thought, creating physical marks to preserve information across time. This ability allowed knowledge to exist beyond the lifespan of the individual who created it. The bone became a carrier of memory. The markings became permanent. The information became preserved. Archaeologists and researchers continue to study the bone to understand its exact purpose. While its precise function cannot be known with certainty, its existence demonstrates that early humans had already developed the ability to create symbolic records. This ability would eventually lead to writing. It would lead to mathematics. It would lead to recorded history. The Labambo bone remains one of the earliest physical examples of this transition. It represents a connection between prehistoric cognition and the later development of complex human societies. Today, the bone remains preserved in a museum where it continues to provide evidence of early human thought and behavior. Its markings remain exactly as they were carved, unchanged across thousands of years. It has survived. It has endured. It has preserved its message. And in that small fragment of bone, carved carefully by human hands 20,000 years ago, there remains a permanent record of one of the earliest known attempts to mark information into the physical world. The wooden object that survived since the Ice Age. At the edge of Kalambo Falls, where water descends over 200 meters into a narrow gorge on the border between Zambia and Tanzania, there is a landscape that has remained active for hundreds of thousands of years. The constant movement of water has shaped the terrain, cutting through rock and soil, exposing layers that preserve evidence of ancient environments. Beneath these layers, archaeologists uncovered something that rarely survives from prehistoric time. It was not made of stone. It was not made of bone. It was made of wood. This discovery was unexpected because wood is one of the least durable materials in the archaeological record. Unlike stone, which can survive almost indefinitely, wood normally decays when exposed to air, moisture, and microorganisms. Over long periods of time, organic materials break down completely, leaving no trace behind. But at Kalambo Falls, environmental conditions created a unique situation where wooden objects were preserved beneath layers of wet sediment. The waterlogged soil prevented oxygen from reaching the buried material. Without oxygen, the processes that normally cause decay could not occur. The wood remained intact. When archaeologists carefully excavated the site, they uncovered wooden artifacts that had been shaped by human hands hundreds of thousands of years ago. These objects showed clear evidence of modification. Their surfaces contained cut marks and shaped edges, demonstrating that early humans had used tools to alter their form. This was not natural breakage. This was intentional shaping. This was deliberate construction. One of the most significant discoveries was a piece of wood that had been carefully worked to create a functional form. Its shape suggested that it had been used as part of a larger structure or tool. The surface showed signs of repeated cutting and smoothing, indicating that the creator had controlled the process. This required planning. This required effort. This required understanding of material properties. The wood itself came from a tree that had grown in the region during a much earlier climatic period. At the time it was shaped, the environment was different from today. Early humans living in the area used available natural materials, including stone and wood, to create tools and structures. Stone tools were used to cut the wood. Sharp edges created controlled marks. These marks remain visible today. The survival of this wooden artifact is extremely rare. Most wooden objects created during prehistoric periods have disappeared completely, leaving only stone tools behind. The Calambo Falls discovery provides direct physical evidence that early humans used wood extensively, even though it rarely survives in the archaeological record. The artifact remained buried. The sediment protected it. The structure endured. The excavation process required careful removal of surrounding soil to avoid damaging the preserved wood. Archaeologists documented the position of the artifact and examined its surface to understand how it had been shaped. The shape reflects deliberate modification. The surface reflects tool use. The preservation reflects environmental protection. This discovery provides insight into the technological abilities of early humans. It demonstrates that they were capable of selecting appropriate materials and modifying them to serve practical purposes. They understood how to shape wood. They understood how to use tools. They understood how to create functional objects. The presence of worked wood at Calambo Falls indicates that prehistoric humans used a wider range of materials than previously understood. While stone tools survive more frequently, wood would have been equally important for daily life. It could be used for construction. It could be used for tools. It could be used for structural support. The waterlogged conditions at the site created a natural preservation environment. Layers of sediment covered the artifact quickly, sealing it away from exposure and protecting it across hundreds of thousands of years. The wood remained in place. Its structure remained visible. Its shape remained intact. Standing at Calambo Falls today, the landscape continues to change as water flows through the gorge. But beneath the surface, preserved within layers of sediment, remains evidence of human activity from a time far older than most surviving artifacts. The wooden object represents one of the earliest known examples of humans shaping organic material. It demonstrates technological ability. It demonstrates adaptation. It demonstrates continuity. The artifact remains preserved as physical evidence of human interaction with the environment during the Ice Age. Its survival provides direct insight into how early humans used natural materials to create tools and structures. And beneath the soil near the falls, where water and sediment protected it for hundreds of thousands of years, the shaped wood remains exactly where it was left, preserving the physical record of one of the oldest known wooden objects ever created by human hands. The object that was touched by hands 40,000 years ago. More than 40,000 years ago, in a landscape shaped by ice, wind, and slow environmental change, a human being entered a limestone cave that would quietly preserve their presence long after their lifetime had ended. The cave, now known as Hohle Fels, stood in what is today southern Germany, its entrance opening into a protected interior space where generations of people had taken shelter from the outside world. Inside, the temperature remained stable, the air remained still, and the stone walls created an environment where sound softened and movement slowed. At some point during that distant time, one individual carried with them a piece of mammoth ivory. This ivory had once been part of a living animal that moved across the Ice Age landscape. After the animal's death, its tusk remained behind, becoming part of the natural environment until it was found by human hands. The person who picked it up would have recognized its physical properties immediately. Ivory was strong, dense, and capable of being shaped, but it required effort and patience to work with. It could not be broken casually into a useful form. It had to be shaped deliberately. Inside the cave, that person began to carve. They used a stone tool, likely made from flint or another hard mineral capable of cutting into the ivory surface. Each movement of the tool removed a small amount of material, gradually changing the shape of the object. This process did not happen instantly. It required repeated effort, careful attention, and physical control. The person would have held the ivory firmly, turning it slowly as they worked, adjusting their grip, observing the changes and continuing until the form they intended began to emerge. Every mark they made remained permanent. Every cut altered the surface forever. There was no way to undo the process once it began. This act of shaping ivory represented more than physical labor. It represented intention. The person was not simply reacting to their environment. They were creating something that did not exist before. They were imposing form onto material, transforming a natural object into something shaped by human decision. When archaeologists discovered the figurine tens of thousands of years later, they found it buried beneath layers of sediment that had accumulated slowly over time. These layers protected the object, isolating it from environmental forces that would normally cause organic material to decay. The cave environment prevented exposure to sunlight, limited moisture variation, and preserved the ivory in a stable condition. The figurine had remained exactly where it was left. It had not been moved. It had not been altered. The surface still carried the marks of the carving process. These marks provided direct evidence of human action, allowing researchers to understand how the object was created. The depth and direction of each incision revealed the movement of the tool. The smooth areas showed where the surface had been refined. The entire object preserved the physical history of its creation. What makes this figurine extraordinary is not only its age, but the moment it represents. At the time it was created, there was no written language. There were no recorded histories. There were no permanent human settlements as they exist today. And yet, a person chose to create something that would outlast them. They did not know that it would survive. They did not know that it would be found. They simply created it. The cave preserved their action. The sediment protected it. Time carried it forward. The figurine remained buried for thousands of years. As climates changed, ice receded, forests grew, and new human societies emerged. Entire civilizations rose and disappeared without ever knowing it existed beneath their feet. When archaeologists finally uncovered it, they encountered something that had not been touched since the Ice Age. The surface they saw was the same surface that had been carved. The shape was the same shape that had been formed. Nothing had been added. Nothing had been removed. This continuity provides a direct connection between modern observers and a moment of human activity that occurred 40,000 years ago. It demonstrates that human beings at that time were capable of abstract thought, deliberate creation, and material transformation. The figurine is physical proof of intention. It is proof of planning. It is proof of awareness. It represents a moment when a human being chose to shape the world around them, leaving behind an object that would preserve evidence of their existence long after they were gone. Today, the figurine remains preserved in controlled conditions, protected from damage, and studied carefully by researchers seeking to understand its origin and significance. Its surface continues to carry the marks left by the person who created it, preserving the physical evidence of their actions. The object has survived environmental change. It has survived burial. It has survived time itself. And in that small carved piece of ivory, there remains the physical record of human presence, preserved across 40,000 years, unchanged, silent, and enduring. The bone tool that was never meant to last. High in the Altai Mountains of southern Siberia, where winters are long and the ground remains frozen for much of the year, there is a cave carved into the rock by natural geological processes over hundreds of thousands of years. This cave, now known as Denisova Cave, appears quiet and unremarkable from the outside. Its entrance opens into darkness, and its interior reveals layers of sediment that have accumulated slowly over immense stretches of time. These layers contain the physical remains of human presence, preserved in a way that allows modern researchers to study actions that took place tens of thousands of years ago. Among these remains, archaeologists uncovered an object so small that it could easily be overlooked, yet its survival carries extraordinary significance. It was a needle, carefully shaped from bone, created by human hands at a time when survival depended entirely on the ability to adapt to an unforgiving environment. This needle was not made to last forever, it was made to solve an immediate problem. It was made to help someone survive. The bone used to create the needle likely came from an animal hunted for food. After the animal was consumed, parts of its skeleton remained behind, becoming available as raw material. The person who created the needle selected a fragment of bone and began shaping it using stone tools. This process required patience and control, because bone can splinter if handled carelessly. The creator would have held the bone firmly, applying pressure gradually, scraping away small fragments until the shape became thin and straight. This was not a fast process. It required repeated effort, constant adjustment, and attention to detail. The surface had to be smoothed, and the tip had to be sharpened carefully to ensure it could pass through animal hide. At one end of the needle, a small hole was carved. This hole was not decorative, it was functional. It allowed thread, made from animal sinew or plant fiber, to pass through, turning the bone fragment into a sewing tool. This transformation changed the way humans interacted with their environment. Instead of relying only on raw animal skins for warmth, they could shape those skins into fitted clothing. This allowed them to survive in colder climates, protecting their bodies from exposure. The needle made this possible. It made adaptation possible. It made survival possible. The person who created the needle could not have known that it would survive for tens of thousands of years. They created it for immediate use, likely to repair clothing, secure animal hides, or assemble protective coverings. It was part of daily life, an object used repeatedly until it was eventually lost or discarded. When it fell to the cave floor, it became part of the sediment. Layer after layer of soil covered it. The cave protected it. The environment inside Denisova Cave remained stable enough to preserve the bone. Unlike open landscapes, where organic material decomposes quickly, the cave shielded the needle from environmental forces. Over time, it remained exactly where it had been left. It did not move. It did not decay completely. It endured. When archaeologists excavated the cave, they uncovered the needle among other artifacts. Its shape was immediately recognizable. The small hole at one end confirmed its purpose. The tool marks along its surface revealed how it had been made. This was not accidental shaping. This was deliberate craftsmanship. This was human intention preserved. Holding the needle today reveals its scale and precision. It fits easily between fingers. Its shape reflects the physical actions of the person who created it. Every detail represents a decision made in a moment that can never be witnessed again, only understood through the object itself. This needle connects two distant points in time. It connects its creator to the present. It preserves their actions. The needle represents a turning point in human adaptation. It demonstrates that early humans were not only reacting to their environment, but actively shaping it to meet their needs. They understood materials, they understood tools, they understood how to transform one object into another. The bone became more than bone. It became a tool. It became a solution. Today, the Denisova needle remains preserved, protected from further damage, and studied carefully. Its existence provides direct evidence of human ingenuity at a time when survival required constant effort. It exists because someone needed it. It survived because it was protected. It remains because it was preserved. And in that small fragment of shaped bone, there remains the physical record of a human decision made tens of thousands of years ago. A decision that allowed someone to endure their environment, leaving behind a tool that was never meant to last, but did. Subterranean Labyrinth of Hawara. In the desert of Egypt, south of Cairo and west of the Nile River, there is a pyramid that does not rise as high as the more famous monuments at Giza, and yet beneath its surface lies something that has fascinated historians and archaeologists for generations. This pyramid, built for the pharaoh Amenemhat The third, during the Middle Kingdom period nearly 4,000 years ago, was not only a burial monument, but part of a much larger and more complex architectural system that extended beneath the ground. Ancient writers described a vast labyrinth associated with this site, a structure so extensive and intricate that it was considered one of the most remarkable constructions of the ancient world. Today, the visible remains of Hawara appear quiet and incomplete, worn down by time and environmental exposure. The pyramid itself rises from the desert floor, its outer casing long removed, exposing the internal stone core. Around it, fragments of walls and foundations hint at structures that once existed nearby. But the most significant part of Hawara was never meant to be seen from the surface. It existed beneath it, hidden within stone corridors, enclosed chambers, and passageways carefully constructed to serve a purpose that extended beyond simple burial. The labyrinth beneath Hawara was designed as part of a funerary complex, a system of spaces connected through planned architectural arrangement. Ancient accounts, including those recorded by the Greek historian Herodotus, described a structure containing numerous chambers and corridors arranged in ways that reflected deliberate organization and structural complexity. These spaces were constructed using massive stone blocks, placed precisely to create stable interior environments capable of enduring over long periods of time. The construction of such a structure required extraordinary effort. Workers quarried stone from distant locations, transported it across the desert, and positioned each block according to a carefully developed plan. The process required coordination, engineering knowledge, and sustained labor over many years. Each stone had to be shaped to fit with those around it, ensuring that the structure remained stable and resistant to collapse. Unlike surface buildings, which could be modified or dismantled, the subterranean structure beneath Hawara was designed for permanence. Once completed, its corridors and chambers became enclosed spaces, separated from the external environment. These spaces were not intended for continuous use. They were intended to exist as part of a funerary system that preserved the physical and symbolic presence of the ruler. Archaeological excavation at Hawara has revealed portions of this buried structure, including foundations and passageways that confirm the existence of a complex architectural system beneath the pyramid. These discoveries demonstrate that the ancient descriptions were not fictional. They were based on real structures that once existed and, in some cases, still exist beneath layers of sand and sediment. The labyrinth was not constructed randomly. Its layout reflected deliberate planning, with corridors leading to chambers positioned in specific arrangements. This organization suggests that the structure served both functional and symbolic purposes. It was not only a physical space, but also part of a broader architectural expression of authority, permanence, and continuity. Over time, environmental conditions and human activity altered the visible portions of the site. Stone blocks were removed, structures collapsed, and sand accumulated, covering parts of the complex. However, the underground portions remained more protected, shielded from surface conditions by layers of earth and stone. The preservation of these buried spaces allows modern researchers to study ancient Egyptian construction methods and understand how large-scale underground architecture was created. The builders of Hawara demonstrated the ability to design and construct complex interior spaces using only the tools and materials available to them. The structure beneath the pyramid represents a deliberate attempt to create an enclosed architectural system capable of enduring beyond the lifetime of its creator. It reflects the understanding that stone, when arranged properly, could preserve space indefinitely. Standing at the site today, the desert appears calm and still. The visible remains do not immediately reveal the complexity that exists beneath the surface. But below the sand, within the stone foundations and buried corridors, the labyrinth of Hawara continues to exist as physical evidence of human construction carried out nearly 4,000 years ago. It remains where it was built. It remains part of the landscape. It remains a preserved structure. And beneath the pyramid of Hawara, where stone corridors were once walked and chambers were once sealed, the labyrinth continues to endure, hidden within the earth that has protected it for millennia. The stone pyramid, hidden in the forest. In a quiet forest in central Italy, far from the monumental ruins of Rome and the well-known archaeological sites that attract constant attention, there exists a structure that does not immediately reveal itself to those passing nearby. The ground is uneven, covered with soil, roots, and vegetation that have grown undisturbed for centuries. Trees rise overhead, and their branches filter sunlight across the forest floor. At first, nothing appears unusual, but beneath the vegetation, carved directly into a massive block of volcanic stone, there is a structure shaped by human hands more than 2,000 years ago. This structure is known today as the Etruscan Pyramid of Bomarzo. It was not built by stacking stone blocks. It was created by removing stone instead of adding it. The monument exists because ancient builders carved away the surrounding rock, shaping what remained into a stepped, pyramid-like form. Unlike constructed pyramids, which rely on placing materials on top of one another, this structure was formed by subtraction. The builders began with a single large mass of volcanic rock and gradually cut into it, creating steps, flat surfaces, and defined edges. This process required sustained effort and careful planning. Volcanic stone is dense and resistant, and shaping it without modern tools required repeated strikes, using harder stone tools and metal implements as technology advanced. Each cut removed a portion of the rock permanently, and each decision shaped the final form. The structure rises in a series of stepped levels, each one carved to create flat platforms and accessible surfaces. These levels were connected by carved steps, allowing movement upward along the monument. At the top, flat areas and carved features suggest that the structure was used for specific human activities, likely related to ritual or ceremonial purposes. The location of the structure within the forest was not accidental. When it was created, the surrounding environment would have been part of a landscape inhabited and used by the Etruscans, a civilization that existed in Italy before the rise of Rome. The Etruscans developed complex settlements, engineering systems, and architectural traditions that influenced later Roman construction. The pyramid at Bomarzo reflects their ability to shape natural landscapes into deliberate architectural forms. It demonstrates control over material. It demonstrates intentional design. Over time, the structure was gradually abandoned. As human activity in the area declined or shifted, vegetation began to grow over the carved stone. Soil accumulated, roots expanded, and the monument became integrated into the natural environment. It did not collapse. It did not disappear. It remained exactly where it had been carved. The volcanic stone preserved the structure. Unlike wood or softer materials, stone resists decay. Even as the surface became covered with moss and soil, the underlying form remained intact. When the structure was rediscovered and studied, its shape revealed the original work of its creators. The carved steps, platforms, and surfaces remain clearly visible. Tool marks can still be observed, showing where the stone was cut and shaped. These marks are physical evidence of human labor. They preserve the process of construction. They preserve the decisions made by the builders. Standing at the site today, the structure appears integrated into the forest itself. Trees grow around it, and the monument exists as part of the landscape rather than separate from it. This integration reflects the passage of time, during which natural processes gradually covered the monument without destroying it. The pyramid does not rise above the landscape like the pyramids of Egypt. It exists within the landscape. It exists as part of the rock itself. The monument demonstrates a different approach to construction, one that relies on shaping existing material rather than assembling new material. This approach required vision, planning, and sustained effort. The builders had to imagine the structure before it existed. They had to remove everything that did not belong. They had to shape the final form gradually. Today, the Etruscan pyramid of Bomarzo remains where it was carved. Its structure continues to preserve the physical evidence of human activity from more than 2,000 years ago. It exists as a permanent transformation of natural rock. It exists as a record of human action. It exists as a structure that has endured. And in the quiet forest where it was carved, the stone pyramid remains exactly as its creators left it, preserving their work within the rock that became their monument, the labyrinth beneath the earth. In central Turkey, where the land rises into dry plateaus and rocky hills shaped by ancient geological forces, there exists a network of underground tunnels carved directly into the earth. From the surface, there is little to suggest their presence. The ground appears solid and uninterrupted, covered by soil and stone that have remained undisturbed for centuries. But beneath this surface lies a system of corridors and chambers, created deliberately by human excavation, forming a hidden architectural space that was never intended to be visible from above. The labyrinth of Porsuk is part of this underground world. It was not built using stacked stone. It was carved directly into the rock itself. The creators of these tunnels began with solid ground and removed material gradually, shaping corridors that extended horizontally through the subsurface. This process required understanding the strength and stability of the surrounding rock. Excavation could not proceed randomly. Each passage had to be shaped in a way that preserved structural integrity, preventing collapse, and ensuring long-term stability. The rock itself became the walls. It became the ceiling. It became the structure. The tunnels were created using tools capable of cutting into stone, likely metal tools such as chisels and hammers. Each strike removed a small portion of rock, and over time, these small removals created passages large enough for human movement. The surfaces of the tunnels still preserve marks left by these tools, providing direct evidence of the excavation process. These marks record physical effort. They record human presence. They record deliberate construction. The labyrinth consists of interconnected passageways and chambers arranged in a pattern that reflects planning rather than accidental formation. Some passages lead to enclosed spaces, while others connect different sections of the underground system. This arrangement suggests intentional design. It suggests organized construction. It suggests functional use. The underground environment provided protection from external conditions. Beneath the surface, temperature fluctuations are reduced, and the rock shields the interior from environmental exposure. This allowed the tunnels to remain stable over extended periods of time. The underground space remained preserved. The rock prevented structural collapse. The structure endured. The purpose of the tunnels likely related to protection, storage, or controlled movement. Underground construction allowed people to create enclosed environments separated from the surface, providing security and stability. The tunnels created hidden space. They created controlled space. They created protected space. Over time, the entrances became obscured by natural processes. Soil accumulated, vegetation grew, and the tunnels remained hidden beneath the ground. Unlike surface buildings, which remain visible underground, structures depend on concealment for their preservation. The labyrinth remained beneath the earth. Its structure remained intact. Its presence remained unknown. When archaeologists explored the site, they encountered passages that had remained sealed and undisturbed. The tunnels preserved their original shape, allowing researchers to study the construction methods used to create them. The surfaces remain unchanged. The corridors remain connected. The excavation remains visible. Walking through the tunnels today reveals the scale of the effort required to create them. The rock walls show where material was removed, and the chambers preserve the original architectural layout. The underground structure represents a transformation of natural rock into human-created space. Instead of building upward, the creators built downward and inward. shaping the earth itself to serve their needs. They removed material to create structure. They shaped space through excavation. They created permanence within the earth. The labyrinth of Porsuk demonstrates how ancient builders used available materials and environments to create hidden architectural systems. The rock itself became both the medium and the structure. Today, beneath the ground in central Turkey, the tunnels remain exactly where they were carved. Their corridors preserve the physical evidence of human activity, demonstrating how people transformed solid rock into a functional underground environment. And beneath the surface, where the earth conceals what lies below, the labyrinth continues to exist, preserved within the rock that was shaped by human hands long ago. The dockyard that waited for water. In the dry plains of Gujarat in western India, far from the modern coastline as it exists today, there is an archaeological site where the ground preserves the remains of a structure that was once connected directly to flowing water. The land appears still and quiet now, covered in dust and marked by excavated brick foundations. But thousands of years ago, this place functioned as a controlled maritime space where boats could enter, dock, and depart. This was not a natural harbor formed by the shape of the land. It was built deliberately, designed, and constructed by the people of the Indus Valley civilization to manage water and movement with precision. This place is known as Lothal. It was not simply a settlement, it was a port. The most significant feature of Lothal is its dockyard, a large rectangular basin constructed using carefully shaped and placed bricks. The basin was designed to hold water, creating a controlled environment where vessels could remain stable while loading or unloading goods. Its walls were constructed with fired bricks, which provided durability and resistance to water erosion. These bricks were arranged tightly, forming surfaces capable of withstanding repeated exposure to water and environmental conditions. The construction required planning at a scale that reflects advanced engineering understanding. The builders had to consider the behavior of water, including seasonal variations, sediment movement, and structural stability. They had to ensure that the dockyard would remain functional even as environmental conditions changed. The basin was connected to an ancient river channel. This channel allowed water to enter and leave. This connection allowed boats to move. Unlike natural riverbanks, which change shape over time, the dockyard created a fixed and predictable space. The walls defined its boundaries, preventing erosion and maintaining structural integrity. This allowed the inhabitants of Lothal to control how water interacted with their settlement. The dockyard was not isolated from the rest of the city. It was integrated into a larger urban environment that included streets, residential areas, and storage facilities. Archaeological excavations have revealed the remains of buildings that were likely used for storing goods, suggesting that materials were transported through the dockyard and into the city. This indicates organized activity. It indicates structured movement of goods. It indicates coordinated planning. The Indus Valley civilization, which existed between approximately 2600 and 1900 BCE, is known for its advanced urban planning and engineering. Cities such as Lothal were constructed with organized street grids, drainage systems, and durable brick architecture. The dockyard at Lothal represents one of the clearest examples of this engineering capability. It demonstrates understanding of hydraulic systems. It demonstrates control over water flow. It demonstrates architectural precision. The bricks used in the dockyard were manufactured using controlled firing techniques, which strengthened the material and increased its durability. This allowed the structure to endure environmental exposure over thousands of years. The walls remain visible today. Their arrangement reflects deliberate construction. Their survival reflects durability. The dockyard was positioned strategically to interact with the natural environment. Its location allowed access to water routes that connected inland settlements with coastal regions. This enabled the movement of goods across distances that could not be covered easily by land. This transformed the settlement into a connected point within a larger network. It allowed exchange, it allowed movement. Over time, environmental changes altered the surrounding landscape. River channels shifted, and water no longer reached the dockyard in the same way. Without a direct connection to flowing water, the basin remained empty, preserving its shape, but no longer serving its original function. The structure remained, the bricks remained, the dockyard endured. Archaeological excavation revealed the full outline of the basin, allowing researchers to understand how it was constructed and used. The preservation of the structure provides insight into the technological capabilities of the Indus Valley civilization. Standing at the site today, the dockyard appears as a large rectangular depression in the ground, lined with brick walls that define its original shape. Although water no longer fills it, the structure continues to preserve the physical evidence of its function. The basin remains clearly defined. The walls remain intact. The structure remains visible. The dockyard represents a deliberate transformation of landscape, where humans shape the natural environment to serve specific purposes. It demonstrates how ancient builders used available materials and knowledge to create structures capable of supporting organized activity. This required planning, this required coordination, this required engineering knowledge. The dockyard at Lothal remains one of the earliest known examples of maritime infrastructure in human history. Its preservation provides direct evidence of how ancient societies interacted with water and used engineering to shape their environment. And in the quiet plains of Gujarat, where the dockyard remains exactly where it was built, the structure continues to preserve the physical record of a time when water filled its basin and connected the city to the wider world. The ruins of a civilization buried beneath the desert. The forgotten cities of the Jiroft culture. In the southeastern region of Iran, near the Halil River, and surrounded by dry plains and distant mountain ranges, there are ancient mounds rising quietly from the earth. These mounds do not immediately reveal what they contain. From a distance, they appear as natural formations shaped by wind and time, but beneath their surface lies the preserved remains of structures built more than 4,000 years ago. These are the ruins of the Jiroft culture, a civilization that existed during the early Bronze Age and left behind evidence of cities, architecture, and organized human life, long before many later civilizations emerged. The land where these ruins exist was once very different. The Halil River provided water, and its presence allowed human settlement to develop in an environment that could support agriculture and permanent habitation. Over time, people built structures using mud, brick and stone, creating organized spaces where daily life could unfold. These buildings formed part of settlements that grew into structured communities, reflecting the ability of their inhabitants to shape the landscape around them. Archaeologists studying the site discovered that the ruins are not limited to a single structure, but instead represent an entire urban environment. Excavations at locations such as Konar Sandal revealed large architectural remains, including what appears to have been a citadel rising above the surrounding settlement. This elevated structure would have served as a central point within the city, visible from a distance and symbolically connected to authority and organization. The existence of such structures demonstrates that the people who lived here were not nomadic groups passing through the land temporarily. They were builders. They created permanent spaces. They established a civilization capable of producing architecture designed to endure beyond individual lifetimes. The process of constructing these settlements required coordination and planning. Mud bricks were formed by mixing earth and water, shaping the material and allowing it to harden. These bricks were then stacked carefully to create walls capable of supporting roofs and defining interior spaces. Over time, entire buildings emerged, creating streets, enclosed rooms, and structural systems that reflected organized urban life. These cities did not appear suddenly. They developed gradually, shaped by generations of human effort. Each wall that was built represented a decision. Each structure reflected intention. Each layer of construction became part of the ground itself as older buildings collapsed and new ones were raised above them. Archaeological evidence indicates that the Giraffe culture flourished during the 3rd millennium BCE, placing it among the earliest known urban civilizations of its region. Its location between Mesopotamia to the west and the Indus Valley civilization to the east suggests that it existed within a broader network of early human societies that were developing organized settlements and exchanging ideas, materials, and technologies. The ruins remained buried for thousands of years. Wind carried dust across the land, gradually covering the structures. Sediment accumulated. Vegetation grew and disappeared. The cities became part of the earth, their presence hidden beneath layers of soil. They did not vanish completely. They remained preserved. They waited beneath the surface. When archaeologists began excavating the area, they uncovered walls, foundations, and architectural remains that revealed the scale of the original settlement. These discoveries confirmed that the site was not a small village, but part of a much larger civilization with its own architectural traditions and urban organization. The ruins preserve physical evidence of human activity from a time when early civilizations were still developing their identities. The placement of walls, the layout of structures, and the materials used in construction all reflect the decisions made by people who lived and worked in this environment thousands of years ago. Standing at the site today, the landscape appears quiet and still. The exposed remains reveal only a fraction of what once existed there. Beneath the surface, additional layers remain buried, preserving structures that have not yet been uncovered. The ground protects them, the earth preserves them, the ruins endure. The Giraffe culture represents one of the earliest examples of organized urban life in its region. Its ruins provide direct physical evidence of human construction, demonstrating that early civilizations possessed the knowledge and ability to create permanent settlements capable of surviving across immense stretches of time. And beneath the desert soil, where ancient walls still exist in silence, the remains of the Giraffe civilization continue to preserve the memory of a city that once stood, built by human hands, and left behind to endure long after its builders were gone. The tomb where the body was covered in stone. The jade burial suit and the Han Dynasty's attempt to preserve the human form. More than 2,000 years ago, during the Han Dynasty in ancient China, a tomb was sealed beneath the earth with the intention that it would never be opened again. The chamber was constructed carefully, using stone to create an enclosed space isolated from the outside world. Inside, placed at the center of the tomb, was the body of a human being prepared in a way unlike ordinary burials. Instead of being wrapped in fabric or placed directly into a coffin, the body was covered entirely in pieces of carved jade, fitted together to form a complete suit. This jade burial suit wasn't decorative in the ordinary sense. It was constructed with precision, using hundreds of individual jade plaques, shaped and arranged to follow the contours of the human body. Each piece was cut deliberately, polished, and then connected to the others using fine wire made from gold, silver, or copper, depending on the status of the individual. When assembled, these plaques formed a continuous covering that enclosed the body completely, creating a protective outer layer made entirely of stone. The creation of such a suit required extraordinary effort and technical skill. Jade is one of the hardest natural materials available, and shaping it requires patience and control. Each plaque had to be cut, smoothed, and drilled before it could be joined with the others. This process involved repeated contact between tools and stone, gradually transforming raw jade into a form capable of covering the human figure. The result was a structure that preserved the shape of the person inside. The jade formed a second surface. The body became enclosed within stone. The tomb itself was constructed beneath the ground, using layers of earth and structural materials to protect its interior. Workers excavated the burial chamber, reinforced its walls, and then sealed it after, placing the body inside. The goal was not temporary preservation, but permanence. The structure was intended to remain closed, protected from environmental exposure and human interference. The use of jade reflected the beliefs of the Han Dynasty regarding preservation and continuity. Jade was valued not only for its physical durability, but also for its resistance to decay. Unlike organic materials which decompose over time, jade remains unchanged. Its hardness and stability made it suitable for creating objects intended to endure across generations. The burial suit was designed to preserve form. It was designed to resist decay. It was designed to endure. Over time, the tomb remained sealed beneath layers of earth. Environmental conditions above the chamber changed, but the interior remained isolated. The jade suit remained in place, preserving the shape of the person inside, even as centuries passed. The chamber protected it, the earth covered it, the structure endured. When archaeologists eventually discovered tombs containing jade burial suits, they encountered objects that had survived intact across 2,000 years. The jade plaques remained connected, preserving the original structure of the suit. Each plaque reflected the physical effort required to create it, and the entire suit demonstrated the level of craftsmanship achieved during the Han Dynasty. The tomb provided protection, the jade provided preservation, the structure provided permanence. The existence of jade burial suits demonstrates the ability of ancient craftsmen to shape durable materials with precision. It also reflects the cultural practices of the society that created them, showing how architecture and material were used together to preserve the human body. Standing before a jade burial suit today reveals the scale of the effort involved. Hundreds of individual pieces remain connected, forming a complete outer shell. The shape reflects the human form preserved in stone. The suit remains intact. The jade remains unchanged. The structure remains preserved. The tomb that contained it fulfilled its purpose. It protected its contents across thousands of years, preserving the work of those who created it. The burial suit represents a deliberate attempt to preserve the physical form beyond death, using one of the most durable materials available. And beneath the earth where the tomb remained sealed, the jade burial suit endured, preserving the shape it was created to protect and carrying forward the physical evidence of human craftsmanship from the Han Dynasty into the present. The temple that spoke from the desert. The Oracle of Siwa and the structure that preserved human belief in stone. In the far western desert of Egypt, near the border with Libya, there is an oasis surrounded by vast stretches of sand and rock. This oasis, known as Siwa, exists as a place where water emerges from the ground, allowing life to continue in an environment that would otherwise remain empty and uninhabitable. Palm trees grow in clusters, sustained by underground water sources, and small settlements exist where people have lived for thousands of years. But rising above this quiet landscape, built on elevated ground overlooking the oasis, there are the remains of a stone temple that once held profound importance for those who traveled across the desert to reach it. This structure is known as the Temple of the Oracle. It was not built near a river. It was not built near a city. It was built in isolation. The location was chosen deliberately. Constructing a temple in such a remote environment required significant effort. Stone had to be transported, shaped, and assembled in a place where resources were limited and conditions were difficult. The builders selected elevated ground, ensuring that the structure would remain visible from a distance and protected from flooding or environmental damage. The temple was constructed using stone blocks arranged carefully to form walls, corridors, and enclosed interior spaces. Each block was positioned to support the weight of those above it, creating a stable structure capable of enduring across centuries. The walls defined the boundaries of the temple, separating the interior from the surrounding desert. This created a controlled environment. It created an enclosed space. It created permanence. The temple was dedicated to the god Amun, a central figure in ancient Egyptian belief. It functioned as a place where individuals could seek guidance through ritual and consultation. People traveled long distances across the desert to reach Siwa, entering the temple to participate in ceremonies conducted by priests. The structure itself made this possible. Its walls defined the ritual space. Its chambers preserved the process. The interior of the temple was arranged to control movement. Passageways led to enclosed rooms, and access was structured so that individuals could move through the temple in a specific sequence. This arrangement reinforced the significance of the interior spaces, separating them from the outside world. The stone created separation. The structure created focus. The architecture created meaning. One of the most significant historical events associated with the temple occurred in 331 BCE, when Alexander the Great traveled across the desert to reach Siwa. Historical accounts describe his journey to consult the oracle, seeking confirmation of his authority and identity. This event reflects the importance of the temple beyond its immediate region. The temple existed as part of a larger cultural network. It influenced distant individuals. It preserved belief through architecture. Over time, environmental conditions and natural processes affected the structure. Some sections of the temple collapsed, and stone blocks shifted or fell. Despite this, much of the original structure remains visible. The surviving walls and foundations preserve the original layout, allowing modern observers to understand how the temple was constructed. The stone resisted complete destruction. The structure endured partial collapse. The temple remained present. Standing at the site today, the isolation of the temple becomes clear. The surrounding desert extends outward, uninterrupted by modern construction. The temple exists as a reminder of the effort required to build and maintain such a structure in a remote location. Its presence reflects deliberate human action. Its survival reflects material durability. Its location reflects intentional choice. The Temple of the Oracle at Siwa represents a combination of architecture, belief, and environmental adaptation. Its construction required understanding of materials and structural stability. Its preservation allows modern researchers to study the physical evidence of ancient building techniques. The stone remains where it was placed. The walls remain partially intact. The structure remains visible. The temple continues to stand as a record of human effort, built in a place where construction was difficult but meaningful. Its stones preserve the work of those who shaped them, and its structure preserves the layout created thousands of years ago. And in the silence of the desert, where wind moves across the surface of the sand and the oasis continues to sustain life, the Temple of the Oracle remains exactly where it was built, preserving the physical evidence of a structure created to connect human presence with something beyond the visible world. The city that was buried beneath its own foundations, Archaeological and the silent remains of the Hittite world. In the central highlands of Turkey, where rolling plains stretch outward toward distant mountains, there is a low mound rising gently from the surrounding land. At first glance, it appears no different from the natural hills scattered across the region. Its surface is uneven, shaped by wind, rain, and time. Grass grows across its slopes, and its presence blends into the wider landscape. But beneath this mound lies the preserved remains of a city that existed more than 4,000 years ago. A place where people built walls, constructed gates, and created structures designed to endure beyond their own lifetimes. This place is known as Archaeological. It was not formed naturally. It was created gradually through human occupation. Over centuries, generations of people lived here, building homes, fortifications, and ceremonial structures. Each time older buildings collapsed or were abandoned, new ones were constructed directly above them. This process continued repeatedly, creating layers of architecture that accumulated beneath the ground. The mound that exists today is the result of this continuous cycle of construction, destruction, and rebuilding. The ground itself became an archive. Each layer preserved a different period. Each structure became part of the foundation for the next. Archaeological excavation has revealed that Alakahoyuk was an important settlement during the Bronze Age, particularly during the period when the Hittite civilization emerged as a major power in the region. The Hittites were known for their ability to construct fortified cities, develop organized political systems, and shape stone into durable architectural forms. One of the most significant features discovered at the site is the monumental gate that once marked the entrance to the city. This gate was constructed using large stone blocks, arranged to form a controlled point of entry. Carved into these stones are reliefs depicting figures and symbols associated with Hittite culture. These carvings were not random decoration. They were deliberate expressions of identity. They were permanent markers of presence. Passing through this gate would have meant entering a defined space, one separated from the outside world by walls and controlled access points. The construction of such gates required planning, coordination, and skilled labor. The stones had to be quarried. They had to be transported. They had to be positioned precisely. Beyond the gate, archaeologists uncovered the remains of structures that once formed the interior of the city. Foundations reveal the outlines of buildings, while fragments of walls indicate how spaces were organized. These remains preserve the layout of the settlement. They preserve the placement of structures. They preserve the decisions made by its builders. Among the most significant discoveries at Alakahoyuk are the royal tombs, burial chambers constructed beneath the ground using stone and earth. These tombs were created to protect the remains of individuals and the objects placed with them. The construction of these chambers required excavation and reinforcement, ensuring that the interior space remained stable over time. The tombs remained sealed. The chambers remained intact. The structure preserved their contents. The preservation of these burial sites provides insight into the cultural practices of the Hittites and the people who lived in this region before them. The placement of objects within the tombs reflects deliberate human action, demonstrating how materials were used to create lasting memorials. The city itself eventually declined. Its structures collapsed. Its surface became covered with soil. Over time, natural processes concealed the remains. Wind carried dust, vegetation grew, and the city disappeared from view. What remained was the mound, preserving everything beneath it. The city was not destroyed completely. It was buried. It was preserved. When archaeologists began excavating Alakahoyuk, they removed layers of soil carefully, revealing the structures hidden below. Each layer exposed a different period, allowing researchers to reconstruct the history of the settlement. The stones remained where they were placed. The walls preserved their original positions. The city endured beneath the earth. Standing at the site today, the exposed ruins reveal the physical evidence of human construction carried out thousands of years ago. The carved stones, the foundations, and the burial chambers all reflect the actions of people who shaped their environment deliberately. The material endured, the structure endured, the evidence endured. Alakahoyuk represents more than a single city. It represents the accumulated effort of generations who lived, built, and left behind structures that became part of the ground itself. And beneath the mound, where stone walls still exist in silence, the remains of Alakahoyuk continue to preserve the physical record of a civilization that shaped the land and left its presence embedded in the earth, the city that recorded its own existence. The ruins of Ebla and the civilization preserved beneath the mound. In northern Syria, rising from the surrounding plains, there is a mound of earth that appears quiet and unremarkable to anyone standing at its base. The surface is shaped by wind and weather, its slopes gradual and uneven, covered with soil that has accumulated across thousands of years. This mound, known today as Tel Mardik, does not immediately reveal what lies beneath it. But within its layers are the preserved remains of an ancient city that once stood as one of the most important centers of human civilization during the 3rd millennium BCE. This city was Ebla. It was not a temporary settlement, it was a permanent and organized urban center. More than 4,000 years ago, Ebla existed as a functioning city, with walls, streets, buildings, and administrative structures constructed deliberately by human hands. The people who lived there shaped mud, brick, and stone into architectural forms capable of supporting daily life. These materials were arranged carefully, forming walls that defined interior spaces and created protection from the external environment. The construction of the city required coordination and planning. Workers produced mud bricks by mixing earth and water, shaping the material into uniform blocks, and allowing them to harden under the sun. These bricks were then stacked to form walls that could support roofs made from wood and other materials. Each wall defined space. Each structure defined purpose. Each building became part of the city. Over time, Ebla grew into a complex urban environment. Its layout included residential areas, administrative buildings, and large structures that served central functions. Among the most significant discoveries at the site is the Royal Palace, a massive building that once stood at the heart of the city. This palace was constructed using thousands of bricks. Its walls supported enclosed rooms. Its structure reflected authority and organization. The palace was not only a physical structure, but also a center of administration. Within its rooms, individuals conducted activities related to governance, storage, and coordination of resources. The building itself preserved the evidence of these activities through its architectural design. The city existed within a wider network of early civilizations. Its location allowed interaction with other regions, and its development reflects the broader emergence of organized societies during the Bronze Age. Over time, however, Ebla was abandoned. Its buildings deteriorated, its walls collapsed. Natural processes gradually covered the remains. Wind carried dust across the site, soil accumulated, and vegetation grew. The structures became buried beneath layers of earth, preserving their form while concealing their existence. The city disappeared from view. But it did not disappear completely. It remained beneath the ground. When archaeologists began excavating Tel Marduk in the 20th century, they uncovered the foundations of Ebla. Carefully removing layers of soil, they revealed walls, rooms, and architectural features that had remained preserved for thousands of years. The structures remained where they were built. The layout remained visible. The city endured beneath the earth. One of the most important discoveries at Ebla was the archive of clay tablets found within the palace. These tablets were inscribed with writing, preserving records created by the people who lived there. Their survival provides direct evidence of human thought and administration from a time long before modern history. The tablets remained in place. The rooms preserved them. The structure protected them. The ruins of Ebla demonstrate the ability of early civilizations to create permanent urban environments. The city was not accidental. It was planned, constructed, and maintained by individuals who understood how to shape materials into stable architectural forms. Standing at the site today, the exposed remains reveal only part of what once existed. Beneath the surface, additional layers remain buried, preserving structures that have not yet been uncovered. The ground protects them. The soil preserves them. The ruins endure. Ebla represents one of the earliest examples of organized urban civilization. Its structures preserve the physical evidence of human construction, while its buried remains continue to provide insight into the development of early cities. And beneath the mound of Tel Marduk, where ancient walls still rest within the earth, the ruins of Ebla continue to preserve the physical record of a city that once stood, built deliberately, inhabited fully, and then left behind to endure across thousands of years. The city built in a perfect circle. Archaeum and the settlement that was designed before it was built. In the open grasslands of southern Russia, near the eastern slopes of the Ural Mountains, there is a place where the ground preserves the remains of a settlement unlike most ancient cities. From the air, its shape becomes immediately recognizable. Instead of spreading outward without pattern, the remains form a near perfect circle, with defined boundaries and an internal arrangement that reflects deliberate design. This was not a city that developed gradually without structure. It was planned before it was built. This place is known as Archaeum. It existed more than 4,000 years ago. Its design reflects careful human intention. The settlement was constructed during the Bronze Age by people who understood how to shape their environment using available materials. The builders selected a location on relatively flat terrain where construction could proceed without interference from steep slopes or unstable ground. They then created a circular boundary using earth, wood, and structural reinforcement, forming a protective wall that defined the limits of the city. This wall was not symbolic, it was structural. It separated the interior from the outside. Inside this circular boundary, buildings were arranged in a consistent pattern. Residential structures were positioned side by side, forming a continuous ring that followed the curve of the outer wall. This arrangement created an enclosed interior space at the center of the settlement. The design required coordination, it required measurement, it required planning. Each structure was built using materials available in the surrounding environment, including wood, clay, and soil. These materials were shaped and assembled to create walls capable of supporting roofs and enclosing interior spaces. The buildings were positioned so that their walls connected, forming a continuous structural system. This created stability, it created efficiency, it created permanence. The circular layout was not accidental. It reflects a level of planning that required understanding geometry and spatial organization. The builders had to determine the diameter of the circle, position each structure accordingly, and maintain alignment throughout construction. This required foresight. It required coordination between individuals. It required shared knowledge. Archaeological excavation has revealed the foundations of these structures, allowing researchers to reconstruct the layout of the settlement. The remains preserve the positions of walls, entrances, and internal spaces. The ground preserved their arrangement. The soil preserved their placement. The structure endured beneath the surface. The settlement also included controlled entry points, where access to the interior could be regulated. These entrances were integrated into the circular wall, ensuring that movement into and out of the city occurred through defined locations. This provided protection. It provided control. It provided structure. At the center of the settlement, an open space existed, surrounded by the ring of buildings. This central area may have served communal or functional purposes, reflecting the organized nature of the community. The entire layout reflects deliberate design. It reflects organized construction. It reflects human planning on a large scale. Over time, the settlement was abandoned. The structures deteriorated, and natural processes gradually covered the remains. Wind carried soil across the site, and vegetation grew over the buried foundations. The city disappeared from view, but its structure remained preserved. It remained beneath the ground. When archaeologists discovered Archaeum, they uncovered the circular layout and recognized its significance immediately. The preservation of the settlement allowed researchers to study how ancient builders designed and constructed organized living spaces. The remains still mark the original positions of structures. The circular form remains visible. The design remains intact. Standing at the site today, the circular outline of the settlement can still be seen. Even after thousands of years, the shape created by its builders remains recognizable. Archaeum represents one of the clearest examples of planned urban construction from the Bronze Age. Its layout demonstrates the ability of early societies to organize space deliberately and create settlements that reflected shared architectural vision. The structure exists as physical evidence of human planning. It exists as evidence of coordinated construction. It exists as evidence of permanence. And beneath the grasslands of southern Russia, where the circular outline remains preserved in the earth, the settlement of Arkham continues to exist exactly where it was built, preserving the physical record of a city that was designed, constructed, and then left behind to endure across thousands of years. The tombs carved into the face of the mountain, the Lycian rock-cut tombs, and the human need to be remembered. Along the southwestern coast of Turkey, where mountains rise sharply from river valleys, and the land meets the Mediterranean, there are cliffs that carry the visible marks of deliberate human effort. These marks do not appear at ground level. They exist high above the valley floor, carved directly into vertical rock faces. From a distance, they resemble the entrances to structures that were built, but they were not built in the traditional sense. They were carved into the mountain itself. These are the rock-cut tombs of Lycia. They were not placed randomly. They were carved with intention. More than 2,000 years ago, during the first millennium BCE, the people of Lycia shaped these tombs into the stone cliffs using tools capable of cutting into solid rock. The process required planning, physical effort, and an understanding of the material they were working with. The mountain was not simply a surface to decorate, it became the structure itself. The tombs were positioned high above the ground deliberately. Their placement ensured that they remained visible from the valley below, creating a permanent presence that could be seen across distance and time. This location also protected them from environmental damage and human interference. The builders had to reach the rock face. They had to carve directly into it. They had to shape the interior space. The process began by cutting into the rock surface to create an entrance. Workers then removed material from inside, forming chambers capable of holding human remains. This excavation required repeated strikes using metal tools, gradually hollowing out the interior. The mountain resisted, but human effort reshaped it. The chambers took form slowly. The exterior surfaces were carved to resemble architectural facades, often reflecting the appearance of wooden buildings. Stone columns, beams, and doorways were shaped directly into the rock, creating the illusion of constructed structures even though they were part of the mountain itself. This required skill. It required precision. It required vision. The interior chambers were enclosed spaces, isolated from the outside environment. Once a body was placed inside, the entrance could be sealed, protecting the remains from disturbance. The stone preserved the chamber. The mountain preserved the tomb. The structure preserved memory. The survival of these tombs is due to the durability of the rock and the stability of their location. Unlike surface structures made from assembled materials, these tombs are part of the mountain itself. Their existence depends on the continued presence of the rock in which they were carved. They cannot collapse easily. They cannot decay easily. They remain where they were created. Standing below the cliffs today, the tombs remain visible. Their entrances appear as dark openings within, the stone marking the places where humans carved permanent spaces for the dead. Each tomb represents human action. Each chamber represents deliberate construction. Each carved surface represents effort. The tombs reflect more than technical ability. They reflect human awareness of time and memory. The builders created these structures knowing that they would remain after their own lives had ended. They carved into permanence. They carved into stone. They carved into the future. Environmental changes have occurred since their creation. Vegetation has grown, climates have shifted, and civilizations have risen and fallen. Yet the tombs remain in place, unchanged in their position. The mountain has endured. The carvings have endured. The tombs have endured. Archaeological study of the Lycian tombs has revealed how ancient societies used natural landscapes as part of their architectural systems. Instead of transporting stone blocks and assembling structures, they shaped existing rock into functional spaces. The mountain became architecture, the rock became structure, the cliff became monument. Walking through the valleys below these cliffs reveals the scale of the effort required. The height of the tombs, the precision of their carvings, and the durability of their structure all reflect sustained human labor. The stone preserves every cut. It preserves every surface. It preserves every decision. The Lycian tombs remain exactly where they were carved. They continue to exist as physical evidence of human activity carried out more than 2,000 years ago. They remain visible. They remain intact. They remain present. And in the face of the mountain, where human hands once carved chambers into solid rock, the tombs of Lycia continue to preserve the physical record of a decision made long ago, to create something that would endure beyond the lifetime of its creator, and remain part of the landscape for as long as the mountain itself exists. The tombs that watched the Nile for 4,000 years, the cliffside chambers of Beni Hassan, and the human effort to preserve identity along the eastern bank of the Nile River in central Egypt, where the fertile valley meets the rising desert cliffs. There is a line of openings carved into the face of the mountain. From the valley below, these openings appear small and distant, positioned high above the green ribbon of cultivated land that follows the course of the river. The cliffs themselves rise sharply, forming a natural barrier between the living landscape of the Nile and the dry stillness of the desert beyond. Within these cliffs, ancient builders carved chambers directly into the rock, creating tombs that have remained in place for nearly 4,000 years. These are the tombs of Beni Hassan. They were not constructed on the surface, they were carved into the mountain itself. The decision to carve tombs into the rock was deliberate and practical. Stone provided protection that no other material could offer. Unlike structures built from mud brick or wood, which can collapse or decay over time, rock-cut chambers remain stable as long as the surrounding cliff remains intact. The builders understood this, and they used the mountain itself as the structure, removing material to create interior spaces that would endure. The process began by selecting a suitable location along the cliff face. Workers had to reach the rock surface, often climbing or constructing temporary supports to access the area where excavation would begin. Using metal tools such as chisels and hammers, they cut into the limestone, gradually removing stone to create an entrance. This was slow work. It required precision. It required sustained physical effort. Once the entrance was formed, excavation continued inward. Workers removed stone piece by piece, hollowing out chambers large enough to serve as burial spaces. The interior walls were shaped deliberately, creating smooth surfaces and structural stability. These chambers were not random cavities. They were planned architectural spaces. They were shaped intentionally. Some tombs included columns carved directly from the rock, left in place to support the ceiling. These columns were not separate objects brought into the chamber. They were part of the original stone, shaped by removing everything around them. The mountain became the structure. The stone became the support. The cliff became the tomb. The tombs of Beni Hassan were created during Egypt's Middle Kingdom period, approximately between 2000 and 1700 BCE. They served as burial places for officials and individuals of importance within the region. Their placement high above the Nile Valley ensured visibility and protection. The location preserved the tombs, the height protected them, the stone preserved their form. Inside the chambers, the walls were often decorated with carvings and paintings. These images depicted scenes from daily life, including agriculture, hunting, and human activity. The purpose of these images was not decorative alone. They represented identity, preserving visual records of the individual and their world. The stone preserved these images. The walls preserved these scenes. The chamber preserved memory. Over time, the entrances to the tombs remained visible, even as civilizations changed and new societies emerged along the Nile. The rock protected the interior from environmental exposure, allowing the structure to remain intact across thousands of years. The tombs were never meant to be temporary. They were meant to endure. They were meant to remain. Standing at the base of the cliffs today, the tomb entrances remain visible, aligned along the rock face exactly where they were carved. Their presence reflects the decisions made by individuals who shaped the mountain to create permanent spaces for burial. Each tomb represents deliberate effort. Each chamber represents controlled excavation. Each surface represents human action. The preservation of these tombs allows modern observers to see the physical results of construction carried out thousands of years ago. The stone walls remain stable. The carved columns remain intact. The chambers preserve their original shape. The cliff has endured. The tombs have endured. The structure has endured. The tombs of Beni Hassan demonstrate how ancient builders used natural landscapes as architectural material. Instead of constructing buildings from separate components, they shaped the mountain itself, creating spaces designed to last beyond individual lifetimes. And along the cliffs above the Nile, where the desert meets the fertile valley, the tombs remain exactly where they were carved, preserving the physical evidence of human presence from a time when permanence was achieved not by building upward, but by carving inward into the stone. The monastery that watched the world from above. High above the plains of northern Pakistan, where dry hills rise gradually from the surrounding land, there is a complex of stone ruins that has remained in place for nearly 2,000 years. The structure sits on elevated ground, positioned deliberately above the landscape below. From this height, the horizon extends outward without obstruction, and the movement of people, weather, and time unfolds slowly beneath it. The ruins do not appear suddenly. They emerge gradually as the hillside is approached, revealing terraces, walls, stairways, and enclosed spaces shaped entirely by human effort. This place is known as Takht-i-Bahi. It was not built in a valley, it was built above it. The location was chosen carefully. Elevation provided stability, protection, and separation from the activity of the plains below. Building on higher ground reduced the risk of flooding, preserved the structure from environmental damage, and created a space where daily life could unfold in isolation from external disturbance. Construction began during the 1st century CE, when the region was part of a broader cultural landscape influenced by Buddhist traditions. The builders selected stone as their primary material, shaping blocks and arranging them to form walls capable of supporting permanent structures. Unlike mud brick, which can erode quickly, stone provided durability and resistance to environmental change. Each stone was placed deliberately. Each wall defined space. Each structure became part of the larger complex. The monastery was not a single building. It was a collection of connected architectural spaces arranged across multiple levels of the hillside. Stairways linked terraces, and courtyards provided open areas surrounded by enclosed rooms. This arrangement required planning. It required coordination. It required sustained effort over time. The complex included residential cells where monks lived, spaces designed for gathering, and enclosed areas intended for reflection and ritual. The layout reflects a balance between accessibility and separation, allowing movement while preserving quiet interior spaces. The stone preserved these spaces. The hillside supported them. The structure endured. The construction process required transporting stone across uneven terrain and positioning it carefully. Workers shaped each block and placed it without the use of modern binding materials. Stability depended on precise placement and the weight of the stone itself. This required knowledge of structure. It required understanding of balance. It required careful execution. Over time, Takht-i-Bahi became a functioning monastic complex. Individuals lived within its walls, moving through its corridors and courtyards as part of daily life. The architecture shaped their environment, defining where they walked, where they rested, and where they gathered. The structure shaped human movement. It shaped daily routine. It shaped experience. The monastery remained in use for centuries. During this time, the stone absorbed the physical impact of human activity. Steps were worn gradually by repeated use. Surfaces reflected contact. The structure adapted to the presence of those who occupied it. Eventually, the monastery was abandoned. Human activity ceased. The structure remained. Without maintenance, natural processes began to affect the site. Dust accumulated. Vegetation grew between stones. Some sections collapsed, but the core structure endured, protected by the durability of its materials and its elevated location. The stone resisted erosion. The walls preserved their form. The ruins remained visible. Because it was built on elevated ground, Takti avoided the flooding and sediment burial that affected many settlements in lower regions. This allowed much of the original layout to remain recognizable. The terraces remained defined. The courtyards remained visible. The stairways remained in place. When archaeologists studied the site, they encountered a structure that preserved its original arrangement. The position of rooms, pathways, and open spaces allowed researchers to understand how the monastery functioned. The stone preserved its history. The structure preserved its design. The ruins preserved their identity. Walking through this site today reveals the physical scale of the complex. Each step upward follows the same path once used centuries ago. The stone beneath each foot remains part of the original construction. The structure continues to exist. It continues to preserve its form. It continues to endure. The monastery represents more than architectural achievement. It represents a deliberate effort to create permanence in an environment shaped by time and environmental change. The builders selected materials capable of enduring, and their decisions ensured that the structure would remain long after they were gone. The hillside became foundation. The stone became structure. The monastery became permanent. Today, Takti Bahai remains exactly where it was built, overlooking the plains below. Its walls preserve the physical evidence of human effort carried out nearly 2,000 years ago. The ruins remain intact, the structure remains visible, the stone remains unchanged, and high above the landscape, where the monastery continues to watch the world from its elevated position, the ruins of Takti Bahai preserve the physical record of a place created deliberately, inhabited fully, and left behind to endure across centuries. The fortress that stretched beyond the horizon. In the northeastern region of Iran, where the land stretches outward toward the Caspian Sea and the terrain gradually rises toward distant mountains, there exists the remains of a structure so large that its true scale cannot be understood from a single viewpoint. It does not appear as a single building or a single ruin. Instead, it exists as a continuous line, extending across the landscape, following the contours of the earth itself. In some places, it rises above the ground as a visible barrier. In others, it has become part of the soil, preserved beneath layers of sediment and time. This is the Gorgon Wall. It was not built to define a city. It was built to define a boundary. More than 1,500 years ago, during the era of the Sasanian Empire, builders began constructing this immense defensive structure across the northern frontier of their territory. The wall extended for nearly 200 kilometers, making it one of the longest defensive walls ever created in the ancient world, surpassed only by the largest wall systems in East Asia. Its length was not symbolic. It was functional. It created separation across an entire region. The builders selected a geographic corridor where movement between northern steppe regions and the interior of the empire could be controlled. This location formed a natural passage between mountains and the Caspian Sea, and by constructing a continuous barrier across this passage, they transformed the landscape into a controlled boundary. The wall was built using fired bricks, mud brick, mortar, and locally available soil, materials chosen for their durability and structural strength. Each brick was shaped, fired in kilns, and transported into position. Workers arranged these bricks carefully, forming a continuous structure that could resist environmental forces and remain stable across long distances. The process required coordination on a scale rarely achieved. It required labor sustained over years. It required vision that extended beyond individual lifetimes. The wall was not a simple barrier without structure. Along its length, fortresses were constructed at intervals, creating fortified positions capable of housing soldiers and providing observation points. More than 30 of these forts existed, each integrated directly into the wall system. These structures allowed individuals to monitor movement across the frontier, creating a defensive network that functioned as a single coordinated system. The wall defined the boundary. The forts reinforced it. The structure created permanence. In front of sections of the wall, a ditch was constructed, forming an additional obstacle. This ditch also served to manage water flow, channeling it along the length of the barrier and strengthening its defensive function. The builders understood how to integrate architecture with the natural environment, using both material construction and landscape modification to create stability. The wall did not exist independently of its surroundings. It interacted with the land. It reshaped the terrain. The scale of the wall reflects the organizational capacity of the society that built it. Constructing a structure of this length required producing millions of bricks, transporting materials, and coordinating workers across vast distances. Archaeological evidence suggests that large numbers of soldiers were stationed along the wall, living within its forts and maintaining its function as a defensive boundary. The wall required constant presence. It required maintenance. It required human activity to fulfill its purpose. Over time, the political and military conditions that led to its construction changed. The wall was no longer maintained in the same way. Without continuous repair, sections of the structure deteriorated. Environmental forces gradually altered its appearance. Soil accumulated against its sides. Vegetation grew over its surface. The wall did not disappear suddenly. It became part of the landscape. It remained where it was built. Even in its ruined state, the Gorgon Wall continues to preserve the evidence of its original construction. Portions of the brickwork remain visible, revealing the materials and methods used by its builders. The alignment of the wall remains clear, stretching across the land exactly as it did when it was first constructed. Its path remains unchanged. Its structure remains traceable. Its presence remains permanent. Standing near its remains today reveals the scale of its creation. The wall does not dominate through height alone, but through distance. It extends beyond what the eye can follow, marking a line that once defined the edge of an empire. It represents human effort applied across vast space. It represents the transformation of landscape into structure. It represents permanence created through material and intention. The Gorgon Wall was not built quickly, and it was not built casually. It was built through sustained labor, coordinated planning, and the deliberate decision to create something that could endure across generations. And across the plains of northern Iran, where its remains still trace a silent line through the earth, the wall continues to preserve the physical evidence of a moment when human beings reshaped the landscape itself, creating a boundary that would outlast those who built it and remain long after its original purpose had faded into history. The fortress that rose from salt and earth. In the center of the Siwa oasis, surrounded by desert that stretches outward in every direction, there stands the remains of a fortress, unlike most ancient defensive structures. It does not rise from quarried stone or carved rock. It rises from the earth itself, shaped from materials taken directly from the surrounding land. Its walls appear weathered and fragile, yet they have endured in place for centuries, preserving the form of a city that once existed entirely within its protective boundaries. This is the fortress of Shali. It was not built beside the oasis. It was built as part of it. The fortress stands on slightly elevated ground, allowing it to overlook the surrounding palm groves and water sources that made life possible in an otherwise inhospitable environment. Its position provided visibility across the oasis and created a central point around which the community could organize itself. The builders selected this location deliberately, understanding that elevation would provide both protection and structural stability. Construction began in the 13th century CE when the inhabitants of Siwa sought to create a fortified settlement capable of protecting them from external threats and environmental challenges. The material used to construct Shali was known locally as kershef, a mixture of salt, mud, clay, and sand. This material was readily available within the oasis and could be shaped into blocks that hardened over time. The fortress was not assembled quickly, it was built gradually. It expanded over generations. Walls were raised layer by layer, each section shaped and placed by hand. The material hardened under the desert sun, forming surfaces capable of supporting additional construction. Over time, the fortress grew upward and outward, becoming a dense network of interconnected structures. The walls defined the boundary. The structures defined the interior. The fortress defined the settlement. Inside Shali, narrow passageways and enclosed spaces created a controlled internal environment. These passageways allowed movement while preserving the defensive integrity of the structure. Buildings were constructed closely together, forming continuous surfaces that strengthened the overall stability of the fortress. Each wall supported another, each structure reinforced the next. Each addition became part of the whole. The architecture of Shali reflected the needs of its inhabitants. The fortress provided protection from both human threats and environmental exposure. Its thick walls reduced the impact of heat, while its enclosed design created shaded interior spaces. The structure created protection, it created shelter, it created permanence within an unstable environment. Unlike stone fortresses, which resist erosion more effectively, Shali depended on the continued stability of its material. The salt and mud mixture hardened under dry conditions but remained vulnerable to prolonged exposure to water. For centuries, the desert environment preserved the fortress by limiting moisture exposure. The desert protected it. The climate preserved it. The structure endured. Over time, the fortress became the center of life within the oasis. Families lived within its walls, moving through its passageways and occupying its interior spaces. The architecture shaped their daily experience, defining where they walked, where they rested, and where they found safety. The fortress became a city. It became a home. It became a permanent presence. However, environmental conditions eventually changed. Heavy rains during the early 20th century introduced moisture into the structure, weakening the kershef material. Sections of the fortress collapsed, and parts of the structure became unstable. The walls began to erode. The surfaces began to deteriorate. The structure began to change. Despite this, much of Shali remained standing. Its walls preserved the outline of the original settlement, allowing modern observers to understand its scale and design. The fortress did not disappear. It remained in place. It remained visible. Walking through the ruins today reveals narrow corridors, elevated walls, and structural layers that preserve the physical evidence of its construction. Each surface reflects the effort of those who shaped the material and placed it deliberately. The earth became architecture. The salt became structure. The fortress became permanence. Shali represents a different approach to construction than stone monuments. Instead of relying on materials brought from distant locations, its builders used what was available within their environment, transforming earth into a durable architectural form. The material shaped the structure shaped the settlement shaped human life. Today, the fortress of Shali remains in the Siwa oasis, rising from the same ground from which it was built. Its walls preserve the physical evidence of human effort carried out centuries ago, and its structure continues to define the landscape around it. The fortress remains present. The structure remains visible. The ruins remain enduring. And in the quiet center of the oasis, where desert, salt, and earth once became a city, the fortress of Shali continues to stand as the preserved record of human adaptation, construction, and the decision to create permanence in a place defined by isolation. The stone city built where nothing was supposed to last, in the high desert of northwestern New Mexico, where the land stretches outward beneath an open sky and the horizon appears uninterrupted for vast distances, there exists the preserved remains of a settlement that was constructed with an understanding of permanence that continues to be visible even today. The region is dry, exposed, and shaped by environmental conditions that make survival difficult without preparation and planning. Rainfall is limited, vegetation is sparse, and temperatures shift between extremes across the seasons. It is not a landscape that encourages large, permanent construction, and yet, within this environment, ancient builders created structures that have endured for more than 1,000 years. This place is known as Chaco Canyon. It was not chosen randomly. It was selected deliberately. More than 1,000 years ago, between approximately 850 and 1150 CE, the people now known as the Ancestral Puebloans constructed a complex of buildings within the canyon using stone, earth, and wood. These structures were not temporary shelters. They were designed as permanent architectural forms, carefully positioned and constructed to remain stable across generations. The builders gathered sandstone from the surrounding canyon walls, shaping each piece and placing it carefully to form structural walls. These stones were arranged in layers, fitted together with precision to create surfaces capable of supporting significant weight. Mortar made from mud and earth filled the spaces between stones, binding them into stable formations. Each stone was positioned deliberately. Each wall reflected planning. Each structure represented sustained effort. The most prominent structures within Chaco Canyon are known as great houses, large architectural complexes that contain hundreds of rooms arranged in organized layouts. One of the largest of these, Pueblo Bonito, was constructed in a curved formation, its walls rising several stories above the canyon floor. The scale of construction required coordination across extended periods of time. Workers had to transport stone, shape materials, and assemble structural elements without the use of modern tools or machinery. Wooden beams, carried from distant mountain regions, were placed across walls to support ceilings and upper levels. This required planning beyond immediate need. It required sustained labor. It required a long-term vision. The buildings were positioned carefully within the canyon, taking advantage of natural features that provided structural support and environmental protection. Their placement also reflected awareness of solar movement and seasonal changes, suggesting that the builders understood how to align their structures with predictable natural cycles. The canyon became part of the architecture. The landscape became part of the structure. The environment became part of the design. Within the great houses, rooms were arranged to serve specific purposes. Some spaces were enclosed and protected, while others provided open areas for gathering and movement. Circular chambers, known as kivas, were constructed partially underground, creating stable interior environments insulated from external conditions. These spaces were not accidental. They were planned architectural components. They were integrated into the overall structure. Chaco Canyon functioned as more than a single settlement. It became part of a broader network of connected communities. Roads were constructed across the surrounding landscape, linking the canyon to distant regions. These roads were created by clearing and leveling ground, forming defined pathways that allowed movement between settlements. This required coordination across distance. It required shared effort. It required organized construction. Over time, environmental conditions changed. Drought reduced available resources, and the ability to maintain large permanent settlements became more difficult. Gradually, the population declined, and the structures were no longer actively maintained. Human presence diminished. Construction stopped. The buildings remained. Without continuous maintenance, natural processes began to affect the structures. Some walls collapsed, roofs deteriorated, sediment accumulated across floors and open spaces. Despite this, the stone walls endured, preserving the original layout of the settlement. The material resisted complete destruction. The structure preserved its form. The canyon protected its remains. Standing within Chaco Canyon today reveals the physical evidence of deliberate architectural effort carried out centuries ago. The walls still rise from the canyon floor, marking the boundaries of rooms and enclosed spaces. The arrangement of stones remains visible, preserving the original decisions made by the builders. The structures exist exactly where they were created. Their positions remain unchanged. Their form remains recognizable. The builders of Chaco Canyon transformed a difficult environment into a permanent architectural landscape. They used available materials, understood structural stability, and created buildings capable of enduring across generations. Their work remains visible. Their structures remain present. Their decisions remain preserved in stone. Chaco Canyon continues to exist as physical evidence of human ability to create permanence within an environment defined by exposure and environmental change. Its buildings preserve the record of human construction carried out with intention, coordination, and understanding of material and space. And within the desert canyon, where silence now surrounds walls that once defined a living settlement, the ruins remain exactly where they were built, preserving the physical presence of a civilization that shaped stone into structure and created permanence in a place where nothing was expected to last. The city that became the foundation of empires. In the modern Iranian city of Hamadan, beneath streets, buildings, and the quiet movement of daily life, there exists the buried remains of a city that once stood at the center of power. This city was known in ancient times as Heg-Mataneh, and later as Ekbatana, a place whose existence shaped the rise of early Iranian civilization and influenced the development of empires that followed. Today, its ruins survive beneath layers of earth and stone, preserving the physical evidence of a settlement that existed more than 3,000 years ago. The ground where Hegmatane stands today was not chosen randomly. It lies near the Zagros Mountains, in a region that provided natural protection, access to water, and connection to important travel routes. These conditions allowed human settlement to grow gradually, transforming the landscape into a permanent urban environment. Over time, people shaped mud brick, stone, and earth into structures that defined streets, walls, and enclosed spaces capable of supporting organized life. This was not a temporary settlement, it was a capital. It was a place built to endure. According to ancient historical records, Hegmatana became the capital of the Median Kingdom, one of the earliest Iranian states. It later served as a royal center for successive empires, including the Achaemenid and Parthian empires, reflecting its continued importance across centuries. The decision to maintain this city as a political center across different eras demonstrates its structural strength and strategic significance. The city was constructed using materials available in the surrounding environment. Mud bricks were shaped by hand, dried, and stacked to form walls that defined the boundaries of buildings. These walls created interior spaces protected from environmental exposure, allowing human activity to continue within stable architectural environments. Each brick was shaped deliberately. Each wall defined structure. Each structure defined permanence. Archaeological excavations have revealed that the city followed an organized layout, with buildings arranged in patterns that reflect planning rather than random construction. Wide passageways connected different parts of the settlement, allowing movement between spaces while preserving the overall structural integrity of the city. This organization required coordination, it required shared effort, it required vision beyond individual lifetimes. The architecture of Hegmatane reflects the ability of its builders to transform natural terrain into a functioning urban environment. They created foundations capable of supporting heavy structures, ensuring that buildings remained stable across generations. These foundations became part of the ground itself, preserving the layout of the city long after the original structures deteriorated. The earth preserved their placement, the soil preserved their structure, the ruins preserved their existence. Over time, the city experienced cycles of occupation, destruction, and rebuilding. Empires rose and fell, but the location remained important. The city served as a summer capital for Persian rulers and continued to function as a major urban center across multiple historical periods. This continuity demonstrates the durability of its design. It demonstrates the stability of its foundations. It demonstrates the permanence of its construction. Eventually, however, the city declined. Wars, environmental change, and the passage of time altered its condition. Buildings collapsed, walls eroded, and new settlements formed above the remains of the old. The ancient city became buried beneath layers of earth and human activity. It disappeared from view, but it did not disappear completely. It remained preserved beneath the surface. Archaeological excavation has uncovered portions of the city, revealing foundations, walls, and structural remains that confirm the scale of its original construction. These discoveries show that Hegmatane was not a small settlement, but a large and organized urban center with defensive walls and architectural systems designed to endure. The ruins preserve physical evidence of human effort carried out across generations. They preserve the work of builders. They preserve the decisions of rulers. They preserve the existence of a civilization. Standing at the excavation site today reveals layers of construction that represent different periods of history. Each layer reflects a moment when individuals shaped the landscape to meet their needs, creating structures that would outlast them. The ground beneath Hamadan holds these layers in place. The soil protects their form. The ruins endure. Hegmatane represents one of the earliest examples of permanent urban construction in Iranian history. Its remains preserve the physical record of human planning, political authority, and architectural achievement. It was not built for a single generation. It was built for continuity. It was built for permanence. And beneath the modern city that now covers its foundations, the ruins of Hegmatane continue to exist, preserving the silent structure of a capital that once stood at the center of ancient power and whose physical presence remains embedded in the earth exactly where it was first built.